Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Terrible Home Care. Very glad you're joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it. And you know, a lot of people have questions. A lot of people wonder about how things happen, why they happen. And we're always glad that we can get the answer because Tanner Magee has most of those. Welcome back to the program, State Representative Tanner Magee, District 53. Thanks for joining us.
No, thanks for having me on, Keith. Or
Sure.
why they don't happen might be a better way.
No. We get those kinds of things. But it's really interesting. I think very often people, sometimes they think about the fact, you know, we have to get our cars fit for the road. We got to make sure we have insurance. We got to make sure our tires are working. We got to make sure that everything's working for the car. But very often, are the roads fit for the vehicle? And I think lately, especially here in Terrebonne Parish, people are wondering, gosh, what the heck? Why are our roads so bad? But sometimes people just think, and we're talking about this, I pay taxes, y'all need to fix the roads. It's not that simple.
No, it's really not. And I didn't understand until I really got involved in the legislature and everything else. People, when they pay taxes in Louisiana, they're paying sales tax, they're paying income tax, and they're paying gas tax.
Okay.
Your sales and your income do not any of it goes to your roads.
Not a penny of that ever goes to roads as we have it structured now.
Right, it doesn't. It really goes to, when it's all said and done, it's going to education, it's going to healthcare, it's going to prisons. That's the three main, that's what's eating up that pie. 100% of your gasoline tax is going towards the roads. The last time we really adjusted the gasoline tax, there's a little minor change that I made last year, and I'll get to that, but the last time we did that was 84 or 86 on the gasoline tax. So we're using that money, and that's what, and look, it doesn't go to the legislature. People think that because it's going to the state, it's going to the legislature. It's not. No. It goes directly to DOTD, which includes all the construction work, grass maintenance, their salaries, their engineering, their surveying. 100% is going straight to them. The problem with that is they don't come to the legislature for much of anything because there's no real reason to. So we have legislators ourselves have very, I would say, a lot less influence than we would in like education, healthcare, these sectors where we are writing the check per se.
Right, and you have a little more control, you have a little more power, and you can say, this is what we need to get done for you to get the money.
Correct. So I get just as frustrated as anybody when there's road issues out there that can't be fixed or the different problems because nobody gets the response from DOTD that they should. Now the legislature's tried. And one of the things we tried to do is move the salaries out of the gas tax. So we looked at it as, all right, well, look, maybe if your salary was coming from your sales and income tax and the legislature could put your thumb on you, maybe be a little more responsive to us, and that would free up cash for construction straight on the projects. The governor has never been on board. And look, I'm not saying I wish John Bell would be on board. I don't think the next governor's going to be on board because really DOTD secretary is the governor, right?
Right. It's governing all of those things. So you're asking for the governor to oversee a lot of things that's got a governing body.
Correct. He doesn't want us involved in it because he's in charge of everything. So he's not going to, no governor is going to give that up.
Right. Or take on those costs.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Because then we're also saying, let's take on the cost of those salaries from some other piece of the pie.
Oh, it's like $200 million. It's not.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
It's not cheap. It's a big piece. Now, what I did, I said, it was changed a little bit last year. I went and I took a portion of every vehicle sales tax because, to me, the vehicles are tied to the roads, and going forward, about $300 million per year is going to come out of vehicle sales tax to roads and bridges and construction. We did not put salaries in there on purpose, so that $300 million is going to go directly towards roads, bridges, hard infrastructure for forever. That's a huge inflection of cash over time. Now, it's not happening right now.
Right.
And there's also some other programs that we're dealing with that are looking at it, and I think that's going to tie in. Now, you had the Biden money or the infrastructure bills, but those require matches, those require grants, application process, and then
red tape.
And then the gorilla in the room is the costs have inflated so much. Robinson Canal Bridge is a great example. That project should have been done, but the cost of it tripled. So,
oh my goodness!
Right from the time that
I knew it went up, I didn't know it tripled.
In 1 year it tripled for the cost of the
1 year.
So with DOTD, because I call them, I stay on top of them. And they're saying is, look, we're going to have to push it to the next year, and I'll get into the DOD process too. Probably maybe next break, depending on how much time we have. But they said we're going to push it to next year because then we can pay for it next year because we can use some of the money that's in our budget on the out year and not this year. So, but what that did is it delayed the project a whole entire year from where it should be. Constituents get angry, they call, and I'm with them. I mean, I want better solutions as well. But at the end of the day, that's kind of where you get stuck at.
Yeah, and if we could say, if you have somebody that's got however many hundreds of $1,000,000 they can pay,
Yeah.
then we can do that. But we can only do what we can afford.
That's correct.
And lately, inflation is impacting everything we do.
And another tie to that is like the labor shortage. So like last summer, grass did not get cut by DOTD anywhere.
Right.
The main reason why is because they couldn't find anybody to pay to cut the grass, because they pay $10 an hour. That's all they have budgeted to pay. You can't find $10 an hour to go work inside in air conditioning at McDonald's, let alone be out in the hot sun cutting grass. They went from 20 grass cutters to 2. For the entire, that's including the New Orleans area, it's called Terrebonne. So because we're in that New Orleans district.
Right.
So all of that southeast Louisiana grass was being cut by 2 people. I'm not saying it's right. I get the frustration that everybody has, but that's the reality of the situation, and we have to figure out a way to fix it. Now, we start talking to Terrebonne Parish Consolidated Government. How about y'all cut the grass? State will pay you, and we started doing that at the end.
Right.
But
it's kind of after the fact, and quite frankly, the only way we can do things politically is to prove what the need is, and then establish that and go from there. We can't factor in what we don't know about with regards to inflation. It'd be nice if it was Back to the Future and we say, roads? There are no roads. Well, we still have roads, and there's a lot of discussion about who manages those, but right now it's a process through DOTD, and that process, it's got to be followed.
Correct. And so the way that it works is, and the way that the good news is there is a place for public participation. And honestly, it does work if the public utilizes it. And a lot of times they just don't know about it.
Okay.
I'm not blaming them. They just don't know that they have this process. And so what DOTD does is every year it publishes, it's like the projects they're going to do.
Right.
And it's actually like a 10-year plan of these roads. For example, West Park needs overlaying and needs work. It's in the plan. It should start next year.
Right.
So it's in the hopper.
It's in 2024.
Right. It's in 2024. They're coming to address it. Part of the problem is they're not going to really address minor needs because they know that 24 overhaul is coming. So if I call about a pothole, they're like, well, we're just going to wait till 24.
Right.
But it's in the plan. Now, what they do is they take that plan and they go to every area in the state in what they call the road show. And when they show up at the roadshow, they want public input, and they want the public to complain. I know it seems crazy, but they really do want you to complain, so then they can learn about what issues they can adjust in the plan.
At that time.
And
listen, great example, right by the mall on Main Street, there was a complaint that traffic always gets backed up because only one lane can turn right. Now, 2 lanes turn right there, which alleviates some of the traffic. That came out of the road show.
Exactly. Or people say, look, we're not really using that road over here. This is where we would like to do it. Now, DOT doesn't do it immediately.
Right.
What they do is they send out a traffic counts. They start re-looking at the issue. And then sometimes I'll go talk to them and be like, hey, man, and they'll say, wait a minute, though, Tanner, at the road show, what we heard from the public was X.
Yeah. I know one person told you this, but we heard 25 people telling us this.
Correct. And so they do listen.
They take that in, right?
They do take that in. I know it doesn't seem like they do, but
right.
They do if the public utilizes it. So I can probably do a better job of getting that out there when the road show's in town.
Okay.
For people
we'll help you do that.
Right. I think that's probably something that we could learn.
Right.
As responsible servants.
If we want to hear from them, they got to know about it. We got to communicate it out.
Communicate about it, and then they need to turn out, and then they need to really express themselves.
That is correct.
And do it in a way that's not ugly and combative, but that's informative.
There's a way to be productive.
Yes, because then you get put in the crazy corner, and then nobody listens to you.
Yeah. The squeaky wheel sometimes they grease you into a corner.
Right. Exactly.
And that's about it.
Exactly.
So that's that process. Now, there are some alternatives, and we talked about some of the problems and challenges that DOTD had. When you go from 20 grass cutters to 2, when you lose that percentage, we can't always get things done. We're talking about some of these roads that the state oversees that maybe they're talking to local government about.
They are, and so what they've created is what they call the Rural Road Transfer Program.
Okay.
And what they're trying to do is these highways that are not used too much by the state. The state doesn't want to give up major thoroughfares.
Right.
Because it's commerce. They want to make sure a truck can get from Houma to Shreveport to deliver its product and
Right.
keep the economy going. But these roads are
So Houma and Shreveport got to make sure that it's not eggs.
right, exactly.
Especially if we're going through Iberia. And again, like it's just one of those things that we know. I got rid of my camper because I couldn't travel west.
Right, absolutely. No, and so that's the state doesn't want to give up that control.
Right.
But if it's a highway that's not utilized too much,
Right.
they don't want to maintain it anymore because it's so expensive. So what they'll do is they will pay to have it completely overlaid, fixed to a good standard for liability reasons. Then they will transfer it to the parish authority for free, but the parish has to take over the maintenance and ownership of that road.
Right.
Now, it works great. I mean, because it takes off liability for maintenance from the state, makes it more manageable of a project, but it does take money because the state has to get that thing, that bridge, that road refurbished immediately to turn it over to the parish.
Right. And so there's time in that as well.
There's time and money involved in that as well. So the program is it's a newer program that I don't know that Terrebonne has used it completely like maybe some other parishes have, but it's something that we should look into as we start wanting to take more control over some of these roads. And look, I think we're lucky that we have in a parish that has the ability to do that because some parishes don't.
No, exactly. They don't have the infrastructure to be able to handle that or to be able to manage that. But I know Clay and his team, it also becomes the responsibility of the parish to maintain that road, to maintain the grass at the roadway or in between the road if it's a if it's a boulevard. So
And look,
all of those things come into that.
This is completely an aside, but I want to put it out there because it's one thing I get most complaints about. The state does nothing for sidewalks.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
It could be on a state highway. It does not matter. The state does not do sidewalks. I get that's one of the bigger complaints I have, and that's a complete parish responsibility, even if it's
A state
highway.
If it's a state highway.
If there's a sidewalk that on a state highway, that is a parish responsibility, and the state will not contribute a single dollar to fix any of that.
And so all of those things have to be maintained by the parish.
Correct.
Even though it's on the
State
state
highway.
highway.
Yes.
And so that, again, people just need to know those are the rules.
Right.
That's what we're dealing with.
Yeah, and then look, there's some areas. I can think of one right now by the overpass by the hospital where nobody's really sure whose responsibility it is, and it gets frustrating. I get as frustrated as anybody. You talk to the state, oh, that's not us, that's the parish. The parish, oh, that's not us, that's the feds because of this, and you're like, it's the Coast Guards, and you're like, oh my God, somebody just tell me who, right? And then we can go find out and fix it. But there's a lot of that in the state as well.
Got to figure out on whose map somewhere says, I'm standing here, whose property is this? And, you figure out the property, you figure out the responsibility and those kinds of things.
Correct.
Talking about roads, it's always very interesting. We talk about the ideas and how we get things done, but sometimes the idea is a great idea that just never comes to fruition. Tell us a little bit about that and how things happen kind of in the state.
Yeah, so, we've been working on I-49 since I remember I was a teenager.
Yes.
When I think it got started and still hasn't been completed yet. And one of the things you need to know is that the state has $15 billion backlog on these projects.
Right.
That's 15 with a B, and that's pre-inflation numbers. I don't even know what the number
Oh my
is
gosh,
actually
yeah.
now. So when we talk about there is a real issue as far as funding sources go, and it's why we did the $300 million thing. But to give you an example of what we're facing, part of the Biden Build Back Better plan was infrastructure for stuff like I-49.
Right.
The state's contributing a lot of money to try and finish I-49, both at the north end in Shreveport and then Lafayette towards Houma through
That
St. Mary Parish.
I-49 corridor.
Corridor,
is what it's
correct.
called.
And most of I-49 is just the Highway 90 footprint as we know it.
Right.
But one of the things that has pretty much stopped the project at its halt is the Biden administration has moved towards looking at socioeconomic factors. And what they're looking at, and they pretty much paused the project, is where I-49 would go through Lafayette on Highway 90 through the Acadian Expressway.
Right.
Evangeline Thruway. Evangeline Thruway.
Yeah, I called it the wrong thing earlier.
Yes.
It's my fault.
Both of us late in the day. In that area, that goes through an historic African-American neighborhood. And so what they would do is build an overpass. And they've looked at the impact of overpasses in through lower socioeconomic and historic African-American neighborhoods. And that has caused them to be concerned because the research shows that it damages the neighborhood that it's attached to.
Right.
And so they basically said, you're not building that I-49 thruway right here. You got to go find someplace else. You could imagine a town like Lafayette, or city like Lafayette, that's built up There ain't a whole lot of options for that corridor to get through that area.
Not a lot of space to build
Yes.
elevated highways.
No, not at a extreme high cost. I mean,
Right.
the cost of that's going to be astronomical. And so the state and the feds are kind of at a stopping point on what that looks at like right there. I mean, those, and even you pull out that project a little bit further out to like Broussard, Working Bay.
Yeah, Scott somewhere in there.
Yeah, all those areas though, just to do those exchanges they call them, where you enter into the interstate, those are like $100 and $200 million projects to
Right.
do one exchange. So I mean, you are the price on all this stuff is astronomical.
Right.
And so that's what's really held up that project, not just this, but throughout the time, is it's not as easy as it sounds.
And then there are so many people who feel like, oh, no, we have to have access to this road, and we have to have access to this road. Well, when it's an elevated highway, you only have so many places to access that. Look at, leaving New Orleans, if you will, going towards the river. I mean, there's only so many roads that you do and don't have access to and with, and how much money it costs to do that.
Absolutely. And look, there's always a winner and a loser when a project of that scope happens. I mean,
Right.
if you look at Airline Highway between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, what Airline Highway looked in 1975, what it looks like to right now, it's a loser, right? The interstate system destroyed Airline Highway's economy. You're always going to have those kind of winner and loser scenarios when you start routing commercial
Right.
traffic like that.
Right. And you got to look at what commerce, and you've got to look at how it relates to the volume of vehicles and what needs to be done
Correct.
to correct those things.
Yeah, I mean, look, and Louisiana probably gets bagged on for a lot of things, but the biggest economic corridor in the United States is I-10, New Orleans to Houston to this day.
Yep.
That's where the most economic traffic is moving from in the United States. That's not an accident. That's real. And then we're going through a tiny bridge in Lake Charles that you have to take your life into your own hands to cross over to go to Houston. I mean, that's another huge project, billion-dollar project that the state is looking to do, along with another Baton Rouge exit bridge to try and cause it. So, I mean, there's legitimate and expensive things out there that we are still trying to accomplish, not just for Terrebonne and Houma, but as a state when you're
Right.
looking out for it.
And overall about how we get from one point to another, and being able to do that well. And we just need to be aware of those projects and when they're coming. That's one of the other things that DOTD puts out. They
Yes.
tell you what projects are coming, and they give you some estimated times and dates. And now, like we're realizing, inflation is impacting that.
And all those
the biggest way maybe ever.
In the biggest way ever. And all those projects they do have a cost that they've estimated, and they're all in the roadshow program. So you'll see not just Terrebonne parishes, they'll show you all the anticipated. One of the big ones is the 310 when you're going up 90 to New Orleans, trying to make, there's a plan to get that more,
More strategic entrance and exit.
yeah, more strategic.
Instead of circling around to
Instead
get
of circling
onto
around,
those.
that would be a huge project, I think, for Houma if we could get that project completed.
Right.
Pre-inflation numbers, 300 million. Post-inflation numbers, 600 million. I mean,
Yeah, at least.
At least. And that's something that a project that's not in Terrebonne Parish, but I think has a huge dramatic impact for Terrebonne Parish, that's in St. Charles Parish, that I think we as a delegation would get behind because we know how important it is, but it's on the back burner as the state looks at other things.
Right. And so I think it's very, very helpful, Tanner, for us to realize, the lay people, to realize that there is a process. And if you want to know more, go to the roadshow.
Go to the roadshow.
Go and figure out what's going on and pay attention.
And you'll see.
And be heard.
And the great thing about it is you'll see how the pie is being sliced. You'll see the total amount of the pie, and you'll see how it's sliced. Because sometimes it feels like they're not spending any money on anything. They're spending a lot of money on a lot of things. And look, I'll be the first one to complain. Too much on salaries, too much on those administrative costs. But you'll get a better idea of it all
Right.
at the roadshow.
And what's happening, and all the things y'all are fighting for, all the things y'all are doing for your constituents, and it's appreciated, much like your time. So thanks so much, Dan.
No,
we
thank
really
y'all for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
All right, and that'll do it for this particular segment of Bayou Time. We appreciate State Senator Tanner Magee and all the things that he and his team does, and we appreciate that. And we're going to be back with a whole lot more right here on HTV.